Okay, let's continue on. So here's the rest of section 1. So here's a breakdown maps of the United States. One on the left here shows where's it rain, where are we getting our precipitation. And so if you look at the Wyoming area here, we don't get a lot. Yellow says we're getting less than 41 centimeters a year. So less than half a meter of water a year, not a lot, right? Under 2 feet, under 2 foot of rain. There's some patches in here that get a little bit more. But for the most part, we're pretty arid. You see the eastern part of the United States is where the vast majority of the precipitation falls. Now let's look over here at the right. The right is where there's water shortages, where there's not enough water available. And so you can see the acute shortages are where it's yellow. So this is, and this makes sense, right? I mean, this is all deserty, southwest part of the United States. There's not a lot of water available. You see that there's a general shortage, though, all the way through this whole midsection, including us. So there's a huge portion that still has a water shortage, just not as extreme as the southwest. Where there's adequate supplies, back east. So there's this section back east and this section back east that have plenty of extra water. By the way, the purple shows you metropolitan areas with at least 1 million people. And so these are places that have high water demands. And so there's a lot of people back east, and there's some water to supply a lot of these people. But here, where there's water shortages, these places have question marks on how are they going to get and maintain water supplies. And then if you live in any of these areas where it's a huge population and there's very little water available, these are places where the biggest fuss is going to be made over water. And we see that historically, and we'll continue to see that in the future. So let's look at fresh water in a little bit more detail. So the U.S. has enough renewable fresh water as it currently stands. Okay, the problem is it is not evenly distributed. So, and it's not just not evenly distributed. The vast majority is on the eastern part of the United States. But in addition, a lot of it's being contaminated by both industrial and agricultural use, pesticides, fertilizers coming off agriculture, and then a variety of different toxins that are being placed in it by industry. And so we have enough, but it's not in the right places to support the whole United States evenly. And the stuff we have is becoming polluted. So even though there's enough of it, it's not being managed in a way that makes it necessarily a long-term renewable source for us. We have to be careful. What's the water used for back east? Well, it's used for generating energy and power plant cooling, and then industry. That's the main uses for the water. And so find a way to use that more efficiently so we can make sure we take care of our supply. In the western United States, 85% of what little they have is not used very efficiently. It's used in irrigation systems that allow for a lot of evaporation to occur. And so water, as the population grows, is going to continue to be more and more of an issue. And if heavy droughts come, it will you will see it flare up more and more. So where are those hot spots where we're going to see those flare up, where those conflicts are most likely to happen? Well, there's 17 western states over here. And by 2025, some experts estimate that there could be some real conflicts between water usage around here. So the blue areas are just areas where there's not going to be enough water available in rural areas. And so they're blotted around throughout the United States. You see Arizona right there is a big chunk of that. After that, then we can go into where there's going to be some legitimate conflicts potentially forming. In Wyoming, there's only one, this green one. So the green ones show moderate conflicts. So this is the North Platte River. It feeds into Nebraska. And the South Platte is coming out of Colorado. So, and then they make the Platte River right here. And so the Platte River is responsible for a lot of agriculture, especially through Nebraska. And so Nebraska's constantly fighting and debating with Colorado and Wyoming on water usage and how much of it should be let into their state or not. So that's a conflict that is a pretty moderate one. It's been happening for a long time, and it will continue to escalate as the populations of Denver and Nebraska grow. And so you can see those moderate conflicts are spread everywhere. Sustainable conflict, ones that are going to continue on lasting over and over and over again. You can see that Texas, especially that middle of Texas, San Antonio, Austin, that kind of region. Down in southern New Mexico, Arizona, Phoenix area. We got San Diego areas and Los Angeles areas. We've got majors along the major watersheds in Washington. All right, this is the San Francisco Bay Area. These are areas where there's enough urban population, and the populations are small enough that we're going to see those conflicts grow. And so there's going to be a decent amount of conflict there. When you get into the red section is, boy, this is a scary place to be because we don't have very much water to feed people. So we got Las Vegas, we've got is that Reno, Tahoe area? We got Salt Lake, we got the Denver area, we got Albuquerque, right? We have all of these regions in here that have real water problems that they need to fix, and if they don't, they're going to continue to have real big problems with it. The water shortages are going to continue to grow. Why? Well, dry climates, drought, too many people using the water supply, and it's not being used in a very careful or conservative way. And as a result of all that happening, growing populations and all of these other things, water scarcity is going to grow around the world. And who's going to take the burden of it? Of course, the poorest people do. So research shows, the UN did a study in 2005 that said 1.1 billion people, remember there's 7 billion on the planet, 1.1 billion people don't have enough clean water for drinking, cooking, and washing. 2.6 billion don't have access to even the most basic of sanitation. That's a large portion of 7 billion people in the world. And so water is a real issue around the world. In the United States, a little less so than other places, but you can see from the earlier stuff that water has its issues in the United States as well. Here's our last slide. Who should own it? Should it be managed by private companies and owned by private companies? Should the government be in charge of taking care of water supplies? Whose job is it? And this is a controversy. This is part of that little video I showed you. Water privatization. Now, in some ways, private companies do a great job of creating efficient money-making systems and can dispense water. Is that what we want? Or do we want the governments to manage it? This is a classic game of the tragedy of the common. Who's responsible? It's a common good. One way to manage that is to give it off to a private ownership. That helps to maintain and avoid the tragedy of the common. Or we must put in rules and regulations to maintain that common, or it will be degraded over time. And so we've already seen these issues start to form. Countries now import grain into their country because they want to conserve their water. It will eventually lead to more and more conflicts over water usage and availability. So there's only really 3 options out there in the world. We can either get more water out of aquifers and rivers, we can take water out of the ocean and clean it, or we can stop wasting water. That's the water choices out there. And so we have to make some decisions on who's going to do that. Is it going to be governments or private corporations? And then which one of these 3 are we going to tackle? Are we going to tackle a combination of them? And we'll see what we do moving forward. That's the end of section 1. Peace, love.